The following content is provided under a Creative Commons license. Your support will help MIT OpenCourseware continue to offer high-quality educational resources for free. To make a donation or view additional materials from hundreds of MIT courses, visit MIT OpenCourseware at ocw.mit.edu.
This class is called Game Design. It is not an intro class. How many of you have taken a CMS class before? Okay, about half of you. All right, a number of you haven't taken a CMS class before. It's actually a prerequisite, but I can really take as many students as can fit in here. So let me tell you why that prerequisite exists. The prerequisite exists because in a CMS class, we typically expect people to do a lot of writing. We expect people to expect their grades to depend on the quality of their writing. We expect people to do all of the reading in class and to be able to do it before class starts so that you can actually be prepared to have a conversation about that in class. Different departments, even different humanities departments, do things differently. In CMS class, if you've taken any CMS class, none of this should sound surprising. You know, you've probably written way more in other CMS classes than you would necessarily write in this class. You're also expected to present. You're expected to come up in front of the entire class and talk about your project. You should expect that your grades will depend on the quality of your presentation as well. So one example, you might design a perfectly good game. In fact, an extremely elegant, beautiful, a game for the ages, like Go or something like that, and you design it in this class, and that's great. But if your grammar is terrible in your rules, even though I can still read the rules and I can play the game, and it says, wow, this is a really beautiful game, but your writing sucks, you are going to lose grades based on that. That's one of the things that you should expect. Now there is a writing center over in Building 12, I think, and they're going to be moving in the summer. But right now they're still in Building 12. Definitely take advantage of them. We are looking for concise writing. We are looking for precise writing, but we're not looking for, how shall I put it? Any more words than is necessary to get a point across. We want things to be fast to read. We want things to be easy for lay people to read, not necessarily MIT students to read. You are going to see examples, many examples of very poorly written rules in this class, of games that are actually very well made. I actually kind of like this company here, Haba. How many of you heard of this company, Haba? They make little wooden trains, toys. If you have any kids siblings, they may have gotten toys from this company. They make games for kids, right? Not for children under 3 years. That's the bottom. That's the lower barrier. And the rules are written for, in like 6 different languages, but for kids. Now they still expect parents to be able to explain how these games go, but you can imagine like a 6-year-old picking up a game like this and being able to play it just fine. And this is actually a really elegant game, and we'll be taking a little bit closer at this later today. That's kind of like where you should be aiming for with the quality of your writing. Try to get your stuff as clearly as possible, as quickly as possible, over to as low a reading level as possible. There are a couple of tips that we have written, and that file is up on Stellar. I'm not handing that sheet out because you can go home and download the PDF yourself. And that's called the Rule Style Guide. Do I have a link for that in here? I don't have a link for that in here. I'll just put it on top of the Stellar announcement page. The Rule Style Guide is basically a 2-page document that just gives you a bunch of tips on when to use bullet points versus numbered bullets, for instance. When to things that you absolutely should include, like a list of components in your game, just so that when I get it as an instructor at the end of the assignment, I can actually make sure that everything in your game was provided to me so that I can actually play the whole thing. Give players a way to decide who goes first. Don't just leave it up to the players. Pick a player to go first. Pick something silly like person who grew up closest to the sea or something. I don't know. That's a real rule from the Harv, by the way. So we do encourage inclusive language. It can be a little bit more verbose, but instead of writing, say, Instead of describing all players as male, we do appreciate it when people say he or she. It's fine to be able to flip between he and she, but of course not when you're describing the same player doing a certain role. They're not changing their gender in the middle of the turn. But it's a great way to be able to use language to describe player A, player B. You can also just say the player, the player, the player. It is a little bit more verbose, but in that particular case, there is a sort of higher goal at mind, and that's to get across the point that games are for everyone, especially the games that you're going to be making in this class. There's no particular reason why in this class you should be making a game just for men to play, just for women to play. And right now, it's too easy to fall into the trap where you just generalize that all your players are male, and that's just bad. So don't do that. In fact, if you take the effort to do that, you will see that reflected in your grades. If you take the effort to use inclusive language. Let's see. What else? Attendance. You have to attend every single class. If you are sick, especially if you're sick with something contagious or you're sick to the point where you can't move, say if you broke something, and you really should be resting, that's fine. Just email us before class starts. Now, if there was an accident or something and you had trouble getting to email, that's fine. You can email us after. It would be nice to be able to get some evidence from your doctor, but push comes to shove, I'm not going to be too much of a stickler on that. Things that I don't give automatic absences include being called away for a job interview, being stuck in an airport because you planned your spring break flight back too late or something like that. You have 3 free absences, basically. You have 3 absences where you don't have to provide any excuse. You don't have to tell me this is why you were gone. And that's what I expect, that you can miss about 3 classes and I'm still quite satisfied that you've gotten everything that you need from the class. Illnesses are one of the few things that are really, really out of control and can hit people for extended periods of time. And that wasn't necessarily your fault. Whereas something like being stuck in an airport usually only affects you for 1 class, so it's not that bad. And if you're planning on, how many of you are seniors on the job interview track? Yeah, save those 3 for things like job interviews, because you're going to need that. And you don't have to ask for permission or anything, just go for your job interviews and realize that you have 3 of those. Let's see, what else? If you do miss more than 3 classes and it was not due to illnesses, then you may well get a reduction in your grades. I've had students drop by a full letter grade, so they would have gotten a B, they got a C, based on absences alone. All of their assignments told them that they were going to be B average, but their attendance was poor, and as a result of that. Usually missing 4 classes doesn't drop you a full letter grade, but it really depends on how close you were to the tip of like a B- and a C+ before your attendance is taken into account. There's a little bit more detail in the syllabus about how grades are computed. Plagiarism, that's usually not so much of a problem when it comes to the group projects, because you're going to be writing a lot of your rules and everyone is kind of like keeping an eye on what's actually being handed in for your assignments. So still, just keep in mind that I certainly don't want you to be copying wholesale from somebody else's rules. That's more than plagiarism. That might be copyright infringement. But when it comes to your own writing, there is actually a 1-page personal report for every time you hand in a team assignment. That is, we are expecting you to keep a journal of every team meeting, personal journal about how the team meeting went, what decisions you made. You can write down things like, wow, only half the team turned up and that meeting wasn't really useful, and things like that. These are all useful things to keep in mind, and then you get to choose what you want to write down in your 1-page report. Again, I'm looking for something that's well written, reflective will be very nice. It's like, all right, based on the experience of doing in this team assignment, What will I do differently next time? Or what went well that I want to make sure that I do again next time? Those things are very, very good to put down in your one-page report. Write those on your own. Don't go into like a group writing session. You can compare notes, you can compare journals, that's fine. But when it actually comes down to writing it, I want you to write that on your own. Let's see, what else? How many grad students in here? One? Okay. So grad students, if you're signing up for 608, there's no additional work. If you're signing up for 864, which gives you grad credit, then there is additional work. And that largely involves checking out the games 1 week in advance, making sure that they're all punched, and making sure all the pieces are in there, making sure you know the rules. You don't necessarily have to learn the rules by reading the rules. You can do it by watching Let's Play videos and YouTube stuff. And it's like, however it takes to learn the game, you learn it, and you come in class and you teach your classmates how to play this game. So everyone can get started a little bit faster. Of course, and make sure that all the pieces are inside. Let's see. That being said, everyone should be looking at the rules of these games when they're in class. When you'll see in the class schedule, I actually have all the games that we're going to be playing listed, so that in case the name of the game escapes you, you'll be able to like Google it and look it up later. And you should be looking at the rules because you want to see how rules are written, how good rules are written, how bad rules are written, and you're going to see a lot of really bad rules. And you want to understand how certain things are conveyed. Maybe there's a really elegant game mechanic that you want to try to use a version of that in your own game, and then you want to, but you're having difficulty explaining it. Well, look at the rules of how other board games do it and see whether they do a better job of it. Look at videos. I'm one of the few people who definitely learn games better by watching a video of somebody who's actually played it, or talking to somebody who's actually played it and having it shown to me. I have trouble parsing rules myself, but that's why I can really appreciate well-written rules when I see one. So make sure that you are looking at the rules. Am I missing a page? No, I'm not. All right. As I briefly mentioned earlier, all the assignments in this class are team projects. There is, again, that one-page individual report that you hand in, usually the week after the assignment, and that one you write yourself. But it's all based on that team project, which means you're going to be working on teams typically of 3 to 4 people. I do not recommend teams of 5 people in this class, simply because once you hit 5, you get into certain communications overheads that makes it kind of counterproductive. You can probably get about the same amount of work done with 4 people. The upside, sometimes if all 5 people are living in the same living group, you might be able to make it work. It's still really hard to schedule a meeting with 5 people all at once. Class does end at 4 o'clock. Usually that last hour is game playing time, which means you might be able to take a certain amount of time to meet up with your team. It's even better if the hour between 4 and 5 o'clock is all free for every single member of your team. But that's not going to be the case for every single team, for every single project. And you can switch teams between projects. Assignment 1 can be with a completely different group of people from assignment 2. That's fine. And we're going to do team formation. I think the schedule has it on Monday, yeah, because I'm not sure if this is the entire class yet. So on Monday, we'll actually go a little bit more into brainstorming, talking a little bit about what projects you want to do, assembling teams around that, and then you're off to the races. You've only got like 3 weeks to finish this first game. Is it 3 weeks? 1, 2, 3, yeah, exactly 3 weeks. Actually, it's less than that because you start on a Monday and then you hand it in on that 3rd Wednesday. So a very, very short amount of time. But that's okay because this is supposed to be your very, very quick and dirty first assignment. Get it out of the way, get into the groove of things. We're going to spend most of this month just talking about the discipline of making games. What is iterative design? What is rapid prototyping? What is game testing? Why is it important, and why you're going to be doing this over and over and over and over and over again all semester long. That's the one thing that I want you to walk away from class with, is like being better at iterative design. Who here is familiar with some sort, or like has practiced some sort of iterative design from any discipline? Yeah. For how many of you, like from an engineering background where you practice that? Okay, just get a sense, like which sort of a project kind of work that came from? Meki? Okay.
I was in creating video games last year.
Yeah, creating video games. And
Just building a robot for the 60-70 competition.
okay, yeah. Others?
Software development.
Yeah.
Creating video games, classes.
Right. Yeah. Obviously, the computer game design class is very relevant experience here. This class is, of course, a good prerequisite for getting into CMS 611, which is our creating video games class. That class is a lot more about teamwork. It's a lot more about, obviously, software because it's a video games class. And that's going to be in the fall. So if you're interested after this class is over, you might want to check that one out. And you can talk to the students around here who've done it before. By the way, for those people who've actually been in classes with me, I haven't gotten contacts. I'm just blind right now. My glasses snapped in half, and I have a 3-year-old. Things that happen. Actually, I was playing StarCraft, and then my glasses. Let's see. All right, and the final thing that I want to talk about all the way at the end of the syllabus is this thing called the changelog. Some of you who've done CMS 611 recently will find this quite familiar. And this is, again, one per group, not one per person. So you hand this at the same time as you hand in each assignment. And what I want you to do is at the end of every time you have a design meeting, whether you met in class or you met outside of class on a weekend, even online or something like that, every time you make changes to your game, write down why those changes went down in this format. We give you the sample format. We expect you to stick to it. You can tweak it, but we expect to see at least this much, at least this much detail. What are the actions in your game? What are the goals of the player, or players, of course? What are the problems that your team are noticing after having played through this game? Turn takes too long. No one knows what to do. Game takes too long. Game's over too quickly. Game seems too random and out of our control. All those things write down in problems. These should be useful for you as it is for us. So if somebody misses a design meeting or something, you should be able to keep this on like a Google Doc or some publicly shared document that you can look and says, oh, that's what happened last week. It's like, whoa, you changed the win condition to half what it was. Okay, I guess that's what we're working with now. Why did you do that? And it says, oh, because the game was taking too long, that sort of thing. So we expect to see that come in with your final assignment, with each assignment as well. All right? Any questions so far? There's going to be a bunch of guest lectures, but we haven't labeled them in here because we haven't quite scheduled them just yet. The readings are the same, the games are the same. Some changes might happen to the schedule on Stellar. I will obviously make announcements. I'll make announcements on Stellar. I will make announcements in class. I'll try to update the document on Stellar with the schedule changes. But for the most part, assignments are not going to change. Just some readings may get rearranged. I have to point out something about readings. So here are the books that we're referencing in class. There's a few individual essays, but you're not going to have to read every single one of these back to back. Like from Tabletop, this is actually available as a free PDF from the publisher, and the link of that is on Stellar. So you don't have to buy the book. You just download the PDF, scroll down to the right reading, and just read that. We have one reading from this book, but I actually recommend this book. How many of you have heard of the New Games movement? New Games. It's from the 60s, so new is relative. The New Games movement was something that... Okay, how many of you played with a parachute in gym class when you were in elementary school? Okay, you were part of the New Games movement. This was basically an activist group of game designers in the 60s. Heavily influenced by the Whole Earth catalog, if you've heard of that. Stewart brand? Yeah. Basically, typical counterculture, but in the game side of things, was very specifically about making games that featured different kinds of cooperative play. If they were competitive, they were sort of light-hearted competitive and were still trying to like develop a sense of community. Parachute type games were very much about taking military hardware and turning them into peacetime fun activities. So you know what's a parachute is something that you use to drop soldiers, right? So it's a really neat book. You can see like the title, A Playful Path to Wholeness. It could be some sort of new age writing, but it's actually a pretty nice treatise on a particular kind of game design. Because how do you make games to bring people together, which is a perfectly fine goal when it comes if you want to be a game designer. So check that out if you're interested. Design of everyday things. You should not graduate from MIT Hatton without having read this book. If you design anything, mechanical engineer, software, anything that's meant to be used by a human being. Maybe some of you who work with robots might be able to skip this, but I would suggest not. I think you can read this too and get a lot about usability, accessibility, how to make good user interfaces. We have, I think, 2 readings from here. These are PDFs that are up on our website. Let me leave these 2 for these for last. The Oxford History of Board Games. We actually have a lot of readings from here because it's relevant to our final assignment. And what it is a surprisingly readable list of traditional board games that you've heard about 10% of these. But really, it's a really interesting analysis, and the reason why I prescribed this book is 2 reasons. One, you need this background knowledge to be able to execute assignment 3. The second reason is that it's a good example of what game historical analysis looks like. So if you're ever interested in going to academia and doing this sort of writing, you at least now have a sample of what that looks like. It's not as dry and stodgy as you think. It is about gameplay after all. But we do have a lot of readings. This book is available on reserve in the library. We're gonna try to get more scans of this up on Stellar, but I'm not entirely sure whether I'm legally allowed to put scans up on that many scans up on Stellar. But the hard copy itself is there. I don't think you can even buy this book anymore. This book has been out of print for a really long time. So I'm going to try to increase access to this, but the best I can do right now is that it's on reserve in Hayden Library, I believe. Let's see, what else? Okay. Finally, these 3 books, again, might be familiar if you've ever taken any of the Game Lab classes. Game Design Workshop, Challenges for Game Designers, and Rules of Play. The reading for today is actually chapter 1 from Challenges for Game Designers. All of these books are available online through MIT Library's web portal. The trick is you need to be on a sort of MIT subnet. How many of you live on campus? Okay, you're not going to have a problem. Just go to our Stellar site. There is this thing called the Books 24/7 link on the Stellar. You click on that first before you read any book. That basically does some authentication to make sure that you're actually an MIT student. And if you have a browser with cookies, it should work just fine. And then you click the book that you want to read. You'll get the table of contents. You jump to the chapter. You're reading the book in HTML. However, if you're not on the MIT campus, I think if you have a browser with cookies, you're still fine. But you might have better luck by actually being on the MIT subnet. You do exactly the same step that I said. You go to Stellar, you click on the Books 24/7 link. It authenticates you, and then you can read the book. That you can even print it out. But if you do have trouble reading it for any reason, please let me know, because we're going to have a lot of readings from these 3 books over the entire semester. So let's try to fix that for you as quickly as possible, and then you won't have any more trouble with that. It's free, but it's a bit of a hassle. Okay. That's basically it for the formalities. Again, any questions about how the class is organized? How grades are assigned. It is a project-based class, which means your grades are going to be heavily dependent on the performance of your teammates. So get along with your teammates. Try to do good work, but it's your grade is not going to be determined by how fun your game is. This may come as a surprise to some of you. Fun is one of those things that is really elusive. Even if you know what you're trying to design for, you might not get there. Especially in the constraints of doing 3 projects in one semester. And as someone who's designed a lot of games, both in MIT and outside, I fully acknowledge that you might be perfectly disciplined and do everything that I tell you and still end up with a very unfun game. So I'm not going to grade you on the quality of that. I am going to grade you on your ability to listen to feedback that we provided, feedback that you're getting from testers, your ability to do things like regular testing sessions, the ability to stick to the discipline of iterative design. If your game is mostly not playable until the last week, and then suddenly you pull some sort of like marathon effort to try to get everything working together in that last week, you should not expect a good grade. That's not what I'm trying to teach here. You should be constantly iterating on these games every single week. And if you do that, you should count on a fairly good grade. This is a B average class though. So typically when I grade, that's how it ends up. I'm not actually grading on a curve. It is possible to have an A average class if everybody does incredibly well. But typically in the past couple of years, it's always been B average. All right. So, okay, let me start with an easy question. What are people playing nowadays? What are people in this class playing right? Like, maybe not right now, this instant, but.
You like computer
Yeah.
games? No, any game.
Any game. Board games, card games, computer games.
League of Legends?
League of Legends.
I got a lot of people.
Ascension, Chronicle of the Godslayer.
On Ascension?
Yeah.
Did you say what you going to say Ascension?
I was
gonna say Dominion.
Okay.
I usually read Ascension.
Settlers.
Settlers.
Yeah.
Settlers. Man. Yeah.
Dominion. Adventure Quest?
Adventure Quest?
Wow.
Wait, hold on. What's Adventure Quest? I haven't heard this one.
It's like this online game.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like an RPG.
Yeah.
Is it like it's like?
I guess like it's a lot of pointing and clicking. Like
Yeah.
10 years ago? Yeah. They had like the 10-year anniversary. I don't know.
Oh, so it's an adventure game. It's a point and click adventure game. Cool.
Betrayal, House on the Hill.
Okay. Wait, let me get Adventure Quest. That one I'm just going to show it to Betrayal.
Yeah. Summer
Smash
Wars.
Bros. 2.
Smash.
Liar's Poker.
Wait, hold on. Which version of Smash?
I like Melee.
Melee. Okay.
Everyone in my house wants to play Brawl.
Right. So Melee is GameCube, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the first one I had played.
Okay.
Summer
Liar's
Wars.
Poker.
What?
Liar's
Liar's Poker. All right.
Normal poker.
Oh yeah.
Wait, hold on. What's normal
Yeah.
poker?
Well, I guess Texas Hold'em.
Texas Hold'em poker. Okay. All right.
Innovation.
Okay. Actually, the card game
Yeah.
Innovation actually made locally
Alien
in
Frontiers.
Cambridge. Yeah.
Alien Frontiers.
Alien Front Frontiers. Not familiar with this one. This is
It's an out-of-print game. It's a board game, Euro style.
Okay.
So, and I was gonna say Empire Builder, but you already had that on one of the games that you own.
Oh no. I'm not saying what games do I have. I'm not saying what games
Well, I
I
know,
do.
like I want that game, so I'm a little jealous.
Okay, well, you can try it out.
Zombie Apocalypse.
Zombie Apocalypse.
Oh yeah.
Munchkin.
Oh, Zombicide.
Crawling.
Robo Rally.
One day I'll be able to add Myth to this list.
What myth the fun?
The board game that came out on Kickstarter in April that is going to be delivered sometime this month.
Okay.
So that's one I'm most excited for.
I missed something after Zombie Apocalypse.
Zombicide
Munchkin.
and Munchkin.
Robo Rally. XX.
Robo Rally. Wow. How did people get exposed to Robo Rally? Just out of curiosity. How did people learn about it?
I saw it in an internship. They just had like a bunch of board games and that was one of them.
Okay.
My brother played it somewhere and suggested it to me, and I bought it for my mom.
Okay, I wonder where your brother. It's very
Board games,
MIT-ish game. It's a game about programming, right?
Yeah.
It's about programming and robots beating each other up. So very important.
Cards Against Humanity.
Mhm.
Oh no.
Hex Hex.
Hex. I know Hex
7 Wonders.
1, but what's Hex?
Hex Hex is a game where you have someone casts a hex, and then everyone has a certain number of cards that just tell you what to do with the hex, like the passive left and passive right.
Oh.
And then whoever has the hex in front of them has to deal with the hex with one of their cards. If they can't, then they're hexed, and then they have a chance to play cards which say play when hexed.
I hope there's an actual there's a hexagon involved in
Yeah,
this.
there's
Okay, there's
hexagon.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Oh, we did play test this.
Oh, that's also local. Same people who did innovation didn't play test. Yes, there's a game called We Didn't Play Test This at all,
I did play
and
that
we
one.
didn't play test this either, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
right.
I want to try this. Air Baron.
What?
Air Baron.
Caravan?
Air Baron. A-I-R, air, as in the sky.
Okay.
Baron, as in like not a noble or a lord, but a baron. B-A-R-O-N.
Oh, Air Baron.
Yeah.
Someone should make a game called Air Baron. Right. But this is digital.
No, Avalon Hill, 1997.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Resistance?
Yeah. Resistance.
It's like a mafia-like game, right?
Yeah, I love that game.
Coup.
Clue?
Coup.
C-O-U-P.
C-O-U-P. Oh.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Not familiar
I know
with
that
this
game.
What?
It's the
what's
same
it?
people who made Resistance.
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of like Mafia, except instead of having night and day phases, what you have is people take turns. They have 2 hidden roles, and your role lets you take actions.
Mhm.
So what you do is you lie about what role you have, and people can, in order to take actions that you wouldn't have access to.
Oh, okay.
And the whole game, overall, the mechanics are you make money and then you pay money to kill other people. And when you kill someone, they lose one of their roles. So the ways you lose roles are either killing someone or by lying and being caught, or by challenging someone
By challenging somebody
and
who's
being
not
wrong.
It's like Masquerade.
It's good. I mean, it's a little bit of bluff combined with mafia. Say what?
It's like Masquerade.
Okay. Yeah, and actually we could add Masquerade to this year as well. I mean, so far, like I've stopped and I've asked a couple of people to describe the games that have come out, and you can see it's not really been all that difficult, right? To say this is what's interesting about the game. It's kind of like this game, but then it's got these changes. That's that's a normal way of communicating. You're gonna have to do that multiple times this semester for your own games. But often what happens is that when students come up and talk about their games, they start from like ground, like step 1. This is like, well, this game is a card game that has 52 cards and it's going to be played with 4 players, and it's like, can you like cut to the chase a little bit faster in the way that you just did? The way that you just described, it's kind of like Mafia, but you made these changes and everything. We will want those details. We will want those details, especially when it's written or when we're actually sitting down to play. But when you're coming up here and talking about your own game, give us those elevator pitches that you just did. So it's like it's if you think of this game as a little bit like it's kind of like chess, but it's going but with different pieces or something like that. And then you cut in, and then you can go into greater detail about what your game is. When you give a presentation, though, usually what I'm listening for isn't so much what is your game right now, because I can actually read that later on. But what was your game before it became the thing that it is now? Because I don't necessarily always see that. I will see various play tests, but I may not necessarily get to every single team. I want to know how you made the decisions that you did in order to end up with what you finally submitted. And I'll get all of the details that I need from that final submission when I actually read it. So when you give your presentations, talk about the history of your game, your 3-week history of your game, or the 4-week history of your game. So these are all the games that people have been playing. A lot of board games, a lot of a couple of digital games. Although I think I'm seeing, how many of you are playing these games digitally? Is any of these like board games are playing them digitally?
Physically and digitally.
Yeah. On phone, yeah. You're playing.
Yes.
I think we put out like this Dominion one of
web app.
You
There
can
was a good one, and then
Yeah.
now there's a horrible one.
That's your hand was up too?
Ascension is like, I think it's on the iPhone now.
Yeah, a lot of these games actually do have iPhone and iOS ports, Android ports. Yeah. Huh?
Settlers, it's just like not fun at all. to play it on.
Oh, because you don't. Yeah. All right. Why?
It's more fun to yell at people.
Because it's more fun to yell at people. It's more fun to like guilt people into giving you, trades that are beneficial to you. We often refer to that as over the table talk or the over the table interaction. That's something that that when you're designing a board game or a card game or even a live action game. I want to say that you're allowed to design live action games in this class. Games where you're not actually sitting down, but you're actually moving around. Mafia kind of sits in a gray area. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I think Risk is like the perfect example of that.
Uh-huh.
Because Video Risk is an entirely different game than Board Risk.
Mhm.
You can't cheat.
Oh.
I
Whoa.
think cheating is an integral
Wait.
part of Risk.
Describe the tactics of cheating
You
in.
hide cards in your shoe, you move people's armies to countries that they weren't on before.
That one I've seen.
And you add people to your places.
Mhm. But not like rerolls, right? Because those are hard to get away with.
Monopoly is
No,
the
that's-
worst game ever.
Because of the cheating or because of the way how the game is made?
Because people play it.
Because cheating and because it takes like 12 hours to play.
Well,
Because
it's
like people are
You
playing
can
it.
combine it, you get the best game, right? You can play Riskopoly.
Oh, okay.
So
we can
you
play
send
all your
populace into
trades
combat
and
with
finish.
like Broadway or something?
And then you can put Settlers of Catan in it and it gets crazier.
I think that's sweet. Well, okay, so let's briefly talk about Monopoly then. It's how many people here like playing Monopoly? Okay.
Friendships.
Yeah. How many of you play
Yes.
play Monopoly regularly? Like maybe when you go back with families or something. No. Okay. What are the good things about Monopoly? What do people like about Monopoly?
Making bank.
Okay. All right. That's this like real sense of like progression there, right?
I like putting like 4 houses on one side.
Oh, that's kind of like the real estate version of making bank. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
When you have like a long row of properties all in a row and somebody's like heading into them and you're like, okay, you're not gonna get through here without like getting.
So those little plastic bits mean like everything when it comes to
It's family friendly, and so that like what people like it. One reason people like it is that like a little kid can just win, can do really well and win
Mhm.
based off being lucky.
There's kind of like a minimum age where they get the basic strategy, and then past that point it's kind of like
So,
anyone's
an
game.
anecdote. I played with my family once.
Mhm.
The first and last time I'll ever play with them.
Okay.
So my sister, like, she's a year younger than me, and for some reason always has it out for me.
Mhm.
And so, like, she was about to go bankrupt, and my dad made a deal with her. It's like basically, so anytime you make a profit, you give me 2/3 of it, and I'll make sure you never go out.
Mhm.
And so I was like, now I'm playing against 2 people. Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do anymore.
Yeah, that's called that situation has been known as has been described as king making, where a player who isn't going to win decides who's going to win, and it suck if they're not the person who.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
I actually really like that, kind of like what he said, but in a different light, that it seems like anyone can win, but the more you know about the game, the more you actually start to understand not anyone can win.
Yeah, right.
And in any game where you're rolling 1,000 times, there's very little luck involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it all averages out.
So yeah, it does allow you to implement a lot of strategy, even though just about anyone can play it and understand the rules pretty quickly.
How many of you play Monopoly with sort of over the table bargaining? Like, yeah, all the time.
Yep.
Okay, who doesn't like only the rules, only the things that
I do only the rules.
you do only the rules. But do the other people around the table also do only the rules, or do they play? Yeah, it's like things like I'm just going to give you money, things like that, right?
Oh, they always make me these offers that I don't want, so I just like skip it.
There is something that a lot of people do in Monopoly, and that's put money in free parking.
Yep, not to do.
Never do that. Never do that. Game gets 4 times longer. Never do that, because the game is designed to. The rules of the game, at least, is designed to suck money out of the system. There are inflows, things like the Collect 200, things like the certain community chests and chance cards. But the game's also designed to take money out so that people go bankrupt. By saying, I'm now losing this money, but I'm now putting it on this square, and if anybody happens to land on free parking, they get all this money. That money hasn't actually been sucked out of the system. It's just waiting to be redistributed to somebody else. And that means people take a very long time to go bankrupt. If anyone's complaining about how long the game takes, you might want to check if you're actually playing with that rule. And if you are, and you read the rules, it's not there. It's not there at all. It's the sort of thing, though, that does make it a lot easier for somebody who's about to go bankrupt to get back into the game. So now we're back to this whole family-friendly thing, which is even if you're not that great at playing this game, or maybe even taking it that seriously, you still stand a chance. There's a couple of other things about Monopoly. It's a decent game if you are if you're not at the table all the time. Say it's Thanksgiving or something, and somebody is watching the game or making sure that the turkey doesn't catch on fire or something like that, and needs to like stand up and check and then come back to the game. Everything that you need to know about the game is right there in front of you, and at the moment of time when you need to make your decision. There's very little. I don't think there's any hidden information except for the amount of money that people have, and that's usually fairly easy to just see. Some people get very secretive, but most people don't. Monopoly is an incredibly successful game. I don't think this is a contentious issue. It makes a lot of money. A lot of copies get sold and bought, and there was some ambivalence here about whether it was a good game or not. Why does that game do so commercially well?
Because it's easy and well known.
Is it easy?
Sorry, it's easy to pick up. Not necessarily easy to like win,
Mm-hmm.
but like the rules are like you could take like 10-15 minutes to explain them, and then you play a game.
10-15 minutes to explain if you already know the rules.
If one person knows, just explain
Right.
it to another person.
But chances are somebody does know the rules, right? Somebody
Yeah.
in that room probably has played Monopoly
Because it's
before.
so well known.
Because it's so well known, and
I
again,
think
it
that's
goes
like
back
a
to
snowballing factor.
right.
It's sort of like a classic that, like, it's an old game is that it exists before many other games.
Mhm.
Also, it's easy to play because you don't make decisions really. Like,
Yeah.
it's easy to play without making decisions. Like, roll the dice and move. Roll the dice.
If you
and
can
move.
afford to buy it, buy it. That's
Yeah.
still decision making. Yeah, if it's not a decision, it's a strategy.
Sometimes you see those people make long decisions, like, do I buy it for like 15 minutes?
Yeah, and it's like, no, if you can afford it, buy it. All right. So the decision there's a lot to do in the game, though. You roll the dice, you pull cards out, you move your little dog. You can make bargains with people over the table. You take your little houses and you put them down and you turn them into hotels and stuff. There's a lot of like busy work that you get to do without having to make a single decision. So you feel very active while you're doing it. Any other ideas about why it might be popular? We already talked about how well known it is.
Well, they sell, I guess, like different versions of the same
Mhm.
game. So if you want one that's, I don't know, Star Wars themed, they
Yeah.
create one.
Trivially reskinnable, right? You can turn. I have Monopoly Singapore somewhere. This is where I'm from. They just renamed all the properties. All the amounts of money are exactly the same as your standard Monopoly. I think there are some like more clever versions of Monopoly out there where they add in a few new rules. But you're right. You can easily sell somebody who has Monopoly a different copy of Monopoly. Yeah. But is that person buying a new copy of Monopoly? If you already have a copy of Monopoly, are you buying yourself a new copy of Monopoly?
I guess you're buying yourself a new skin of Monopoly.
Are you? Do you? Does anyone actually pay money for that?
No. I
think you get it.
I mean, they're a good gift.
A good gift. That's the dirty little secret about all these like Parker Brothers, Hasbro. Maybe it's not dirty. It's the reality of it. Like the majority of board games, or these like super mega ultra perennial favorites, are not bought by the people who are playing them. They are bought by somebody else or given as a gift. Which means you can expect that they usually sell most of the copies at Christmas, and people might get them for their birthdays, and that's the difference between a game that shows up in Target or Walmart and a game that shows up in a specialty board game store. You walk into a specialty board game store, which is probably under threat by companies like Amazon, and you're buying a game for yourself. You're buying special dice because you're a role-playing game player, or miniatures, and right next to that are the board games, and you say, hey, this will be fun for my next gathering, either at a friend's house or at my own place or something like that. I want to play this game. You buy a Monopoly, and it's usually not for your own collection. It's usually for somebody else's. So you give a Monopoly to somebody else who already has it, and it's fine because you just gave them the Star Wars version and they did have that. That's how they are successful. I guess what I'm trying to say is that not necessarily it doesn't really necessarily have anything to do with how well that game is designed. There are a couple of nice things that Monopoly does. We talked about how it's relatively easy to learn. The fact that it's been around makes it very easy to teach. It's very friendly to people who are playing on some sort of interrupted schedule, but that's not the reason necessarily why it's a successful game.
So I think a lot of it comes from like the snowballing factor, like everyone knows about Monopoly and stuff.
Yep.
If we assume that's true, like how do you then make like a commercially successful board game?
How much marketing money do you have? I mean, we've got Blockus here. That's probably one of the more successful recent entries, and there's a couple of ways to be able to get a large number of families to buy a board game. If you're living in Germany, there is a big conference called the Essen Spiel, I believe. I might be mangling the language here, in the town of Essen. There are smaller conferences in places like Leipzig. But what they are, in addition to the vendors bringing all of their old and the new board games, saying like this is what we have on sale, we have tons and tons and tons of families going there trying to decide what they're buying for Christmas. And in Germany, that is kind of like an annual tradition for families to buy a Christmas game. Built on top of that, there is this thing, I'm going to mangle all the German in here. The Spiel des Jahres? Des Jahres? Yeah, okay. Basically, Game of the Year award. That is awarded, I believe, at Essen. They definitely do a big thing. I'm not exactly sure how the timing lines up, but definitely the game that happens to be awarded Game of the Year is going to be the biggest mover at a convention like Essen. Convention is not the right word that I'm looking for. It's more like a trade fair. That's probably a good example. And just lots and lots of families will go there. They will buy a lot of the Game of the Year because a bunch of board game critics said this is the best new game that came out this past year. And then with all that money gets circulated back into marketing, you see more ads, you see that little awards sticker on the side of the boxes, more families buy it, and that just snowballs on top of each other, right? So winning sort of, there are similar things in the US. I believe there are, ABC News. No, Board Game Geek.
Yeah, they have their own con in Texas.
Yeah, but not that many families. I mean, I'm thinking more like ABC News doing a top 10 hot toys for this Christmas kind of thing, right? That's the sort of thing that bumps you up from a game that you buy for yourself to a game you start buying for other people, which multiplies how many copies actually gets sold. So that's one way. That's usually one way that it happens. That's not to say that a game that what's called an enthusiast board game, a game that's basically sold to people who are buying it for themselves, can't be commercially successful. It just means that you need to make enough money that you made a profit on it. And a lot of these games. Okay, I think of all the games that I got today, let's see, this is probably, let me see if this one in here works actually. This is probably the sort of game that you will buy for families. This is set, and of course missing its original box, but people play it set, right? Okay. So this is probably fits into the category of like a game that somebody in the room's probably played once and thus can teach everybody else how to play. Who's played Blockers before today? Yeah, okay. How many of you played with your family? Or before you came to, how many of you played before you came to MIT? Okay, high school? Was it?
Like middle school.
Middle school? All right. Yeah, so I think the reason why, this is Mattel, so they certainly know their marketing. But I think the reason why this got popular was, again, one of those top 10 toys of the, to buy that Christmas when it was released. And that's why Blockers really took off. It's a well-designed game. You don't get on those lists without being a well-designed game, but that's not the reason why these games are successful. That's kind of like the bare minimum to even be considered to design a well-designed game. So if you're in this class thinking that you're going to make a lot of money as a board game designer, I know people in Hasbro I can get you in touch with, and I think they're probably going to say, don't expect that. You might be able to have a decent living working in a large company like Hasbro or Mattel, which I think is the same company now. But it's probably not because of the quality of the games that you're designing, but more about your ability to design a game based on a spec that was handed to you, based on the requirements. Like, we need a Star Wars Risk game by Christmas. Design it in 2 months or something like that, and you execute that well, and you will get a good career in a place like Hasbro. If you're designing for yourself, you should feel very happy if you manage to make your initial investment back. A lot of people who are sort of hobbyist game designers who make incredibly good games don't make back the money that they initially invested into it, and that's fine if you went into that business knowing that, because sometimes for some people it's just good enough to be able to have a game with your name on it, being played by a whole bunch of people who appreciate it. Yeah, that's fine. More likely, a lot of you are going into careers, I'm assuming, that are not game design. Some of you are, but some of you will go into a career that might benefit from some of the design practices that you're going to learn in this class. Not just iterative design, although we've already talked about how that's relevant to a number of engineering disciplines, but also things like you want to teach people a new system that you've designed, or a new system that's been put into practice. You want to create some sort of team building exercise. You want to communicate to someone how complex a certain system is that's relevant to your work and to your discipline. There's a bunch of things that games can do to communicate ideas that might be relevant to in whatever career you end up in. So even here in MIT, I'm the creative director of the MIT Game Lab. There's a bunch of different labs here in MIT who are using games for a variety of different purposes. iWire, anyone heard of that one? Yep. It's.
Yeah, I was in Sebastian Sung's lab.
Yep. Over in the Picor Institute, right across the street where the train tracks run under the building. They've got a game that's basically massively single player, really. And you solve a puzzle that is which is kind of paint by. It's kind of like paint by numbers. You're clicking and you're coloring a field. What you're really doing is you're identifying neurons from scanning tunneling microscopes. These are neurons in a from a mouse retina. And you're basically doing all of the pattern recognition that computers have a tremendously difficult time to do, but humans actually are pretty good at. And then you're accumulating all of that data. It's a fairly nice, very clicky, minesweeper-ish kind of feel to this game. It's like you're just clicking things so that they meet a nice contiguous space. It's a 3D game, so there's some sort of mental hoops that your brain gets through, and there's kind of a nice build puzzle feeling. But what you're really doing is you're providing Sebastian Sung's lab with a ton of data about how a mouse's eye is wired, which is amazing. I think they've got a couple of papers. So science is real science. Anyone here from systems dynamics? No. Engineering. I think their parent group is the Aero Astro department, but. Okay. Okay. Assuming that's just a kid out there. I don't know. I mean, if it's just like a 3-year-old or something, that's fine. But I hope it's not someone who's hurt. Okay. But systems, a lot of system dynamics folks on campus, engineering systems design, for instance, will use games to try to teach clients about certain engineering practices. So there's a group here that has a game called Space Tug.
Oh, Space Tug Skirmish?
Yeah, Skirmish.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
I played that. My roommate worked there last summer.
Oh yeah, as Europe.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think they're still looking for more Europes because they've turned their board game into a digital game, and they need to keep working on it.
I had a chance to play it a few weeks ago. It's a good game.
Yeah, it's kind of got I was going to say a Magic the Gathering feel, but that's not really true anymore. The way how the game has evolved, but it's primarily a card game about building satellites, launching them into space, and then realizing that by the time you launch something into space, it's kind of obsolete. And the question is, how do you design a satellite so that it can adapt to changing circumstances? That's what they're teaching people from NASA, from the military about, and they decided that games are the way to do it. It started with a board game, they're going a digital game. There's a very large group here in campus called the Scheller Teacher Education Program, and they design games for K-12 to freshman undergraduate level science, math, language. How to better address some problems in curriculum, in substandard classroom curriculum. So they've done MMOs, they've done puzzle games, they've done a lot of stuff on Flash because it's very easy to get Flash running in the school. It's very much harder to get a whole school lab to download a piece of software and install it across 20 computers, for instance. All these places have Europes. My lab has Europes. So if you're interested in any of these things, you should definitely check them out. You can ask me for more leads. There are a lot of different. And finally, back to Aero Astro, there is a group that works with zero gravity satellites. Talking about they're satellites. They work in zero gravity. Spheres, yeah. These little compressed air, I think carbon dioxide, propelled spheres. They look like gigantic dice actually, and they spin around in space, and they'll run C code. And they have a high school programming competition, kind of like the first robotics tournament. Think of that in zero gravity. So it's like, how do you accomplish this? And it's a pretty cool high school education thing to connect high school kids to space, basically. I know they are looking for Europes, so if you're interested in that, you should definitely talk to me about that. I'll give you the contact information. So I've been yammering for about an hour. Let's take a break, stretch. I'll start distributing some of these games, but we have one more discussion topic before we go into game playing. Okay? Some people should probably distribute yourself up here as well. Bathrooms are out to the right.